I'm joined now by the Times' chief political commentator, Patrick Maguire. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Good morning, Ed.
We're told that Nigel Farage has been partying all night to celebrate his re-election to Parliament in Clacton. This is him speaking to his supporters.
On the hottest day of the year, in the middle of August, in holiday season, we have secured far more votes than we got in the general election of 2024. And in doing so, we have beaten the candidate for the Uniparty. Yes, there were Liberal Democrats, Labour and Conservative canvassers out canvassing for Count Binface.
The chair of the Labour Party, Bridget Phillips, has spoke to Rosie Wright and Callum MacDonald on Times Radio Breakfast.
He forced a by-election he didn't need to have. He stood again. He spent most of the summer chasing a bin around Clacton, and now he's going to come back to Parliament and have to answer some very serious questions he's been seeking to dodge, distracting and deflecting from the £5 million dodgy so-called gift, his connections to a convicted fraudster. You know, the scandal just keeps piling up. And now he's through that by-election, there's no hiding place.
Well, that was Bridget Phillips and speaking to Rosie Wright and Callum MacDonald. You can listen to Times Radio Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Patrick, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but when you flashed up on the screen, I suddenly thought, I've got Harry Kane as a guest.
Oh,
has anyone started comparing you to Harry Kane?
Has anyone started, Ed? They've not stopped.
This new svelte Patrick Maguire, you look great.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Although, this is maybe the third or fourth time I've been compared to Harry Kane.
Oh,
this week. During the World Cup, I was getting it multiple times a day, and on more than one occasion, I was asked for a selfie. So
I can't believe it.
I thought when England went out, I thought, you know what, at least that'll stop now. But no, it still carries on. I know I've got fat again when people start calling me Fat Harry Kane again, which I used to get. Or Henry VIII I occasionally got, but yeah.
Well, Harry, you give me the perfect opening. Did Farage put it in the back of the net last night?
Look, I mean, the facts are, yes, he did. I mean, he was right to say there that his share of the vote is up on 2024. His raw number of votes is up on 2024. The turnout was high. Obviously, the rejoinder to that is, okay, as you said, Ed, go out into the country, and it is not a slam dunk proposition. 63% is not the 75% projected by the constituency polls. And this all looks like a waste of time, and it's a farce, and it's humiliating. But look, for reform, the key prize is his vote is up on 2024, whatever way you look at it. They're the only party to engage seriously with this exercise. You know, Kevin Badenoch calls it a fake by-election, but ultimately 35,000 real voters went out, and Reform are the only people who've bothered to speak to them seriously and collect the data, which is the lifeblood of modern politics. They think Nigel Farage is untouchable in Clacton. He can go out and campaign in the country. So that is how Reform see it. And now, obviously, views will vary. Obviously, Sir John Curtis says, you know, this is only the beginning of his worries. The parliamentary investigation hasn't stopped. But really what I think this shows us is Reform are entering a new era, a harder to quantify era of basically sort of conscientious objection to the strictures of modern politics, of conventional politics, of Westminster politics. You know, it's disregarding parliamentary investigations, disregarding the media, disregarding all the rules we expect politicians to play by. Now, is that a 35% proposition? No. Is it a 30% proposition? Let's see when, pedal hits the metal during a general election campaign. But has Nigel Farage shown that he can speak directly to his own people, even in the face of quite extreme hostility and really unhelpful scrutiny from everybody else? And it's important to separate those two things, because political hostility is not the same thing as journalistic scrutiny. Yeah, he has. And, I think it shows us that no matter how difficult things get for Reform, it's faithful. Its core vote is here to stay. And that is something every other party is going to have to adjust to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dig into the results a bit more now. Farage's 63% does sound very impressive. But does it count for anything when all the other major parties boycotted the vote? That's what I'm discussing with Patrick. I mean, it's a fascinating analysis, Patrick. And I guess the whole thing that we're really debating here is, is this by-election a reset for Nigel Farage? And I do agree with him, obviously, that the real battle at the next election is between Reform and the Conservatives about who comes out on top. Does this give Farage a kick forward, as it were?
It's a really interesting question, and something I've been kicking around in my head, Ed, and I'm interested to know what you think is, did Kemi Babe not make a mistake in not running a candidate here? Yes, she would have lost, but, did the Tories, in dismissing this as fake, miss the opportunity to, I don't know, stand against Nigel Farage? There's a tactical vote against Nigel Farage. You don't have to vote for a guy with a bin on his head. They can attack Nigel Farage on the airwaves for a month. And, you and I know if the Tories had stood this morning and they'd increased their vote share on 2024, we'd all be saying, Kemi's back. The Tories have shown that there's life in the Tories yet. They're eating into Nigel Farage's vote in Clacton, etc., etc. But instead, this seems to confirm what we knew already, which is there are swathes of the country in which the Tories are not a going concern. Yes, Nigel Farage is polarising. I mean, probably more than polarising now, is popular among a section of the electorate, intensely so. But in those sections of the electorate, the Tories are sort of increasingly nowhere. So I don't know, but I think that I can't shake the feeling that maybe the Tories should have run here.
I can't shake the feeling that the last thing the Tories want is a proper by-election triggered by Farage getting an adverse ruling from the parliamentary investigator, because it's quite clear that Clacton is his heartland and he would trounce the Tories. The other thing about this battle, which perhaps I should have asked John Curtis if I had more time, is that Reform's great advantage is that they can win on the right in Scotland and in Wales and in the north of England, and it seems to me that is a difficult battle for the Tories. So it is very hard to gauge. I think they were right to sit this by-election out, but weirdly, I think they would be dreading a proper by-election, if I could put it that way. Anyway, let's move on and talk about Andy Burnham's battle with Middle England, which is the subject of Patrick's column, and we'll do that after the break. Still joined by the Times' chief political commentator, Patrick Maguire.
Patrick, you're slick, entertaining, and cleverer than literally anyone else on Times Radio.
Thank you for that message, Richard Bacon. Apropos of absolutely nothing, Ken says he was 68 on Wednesday. Ken's a friend of the show, so I always read out his text. He's been partying at the Gladstone Library. It sounds like such a Patrick Maguire. Wow. Exactly. I knew you'd like that, Patrick.
I've been to the Gladstone Library. I stayed for 2 nights at the Gladstone Library while I was writing Get In, the inside story of Labour and Starmer. And it's a lovely part of the world, Harden. You just sit there though and think, God, I'll never read as many books as Gladstone did. And you lie in the room, and the church bell next door tolls at ungodly hours, and yeah, it's beautiful. And a couple of nice pubs in Harden as well. So it comes highly recommended for any literary types out there.
Oh, fantastic! I've slept in Robert Walpole's bedroom. But anyway, let's not diverge from Andy Burnham. You've written about his approach to accommodation for asylum seekers. He said it can't just be poor areas that carry the burden of migrant housing. The government is looking to move people into RAF bases, such as one near the Oxfordshire village of Piddington. On Monday, I spoke to the chair of the village's parish council, a man called Tim McNally.
The issues of security started to be the first alarming aspect of concern for us. And then it started to become clear, actually, that this isn't just about that. It's also about the impact upon our children, our families, and the paradigm shift of behaviour that we would have to make, that materialistic change of how we're now going to live our lives as a consequence of this site right in the perimeter of our village.
So this is another problem looming for Andy Burnham after early releases from prisons. How is he going to tackle this one, Patrick?
Well, the first thing to say is Andy Burnham would listen to that interview with Tim McNally, a very well-spoken and articulate man from a nice village in Oxfordshire. And I imagine he would instinctively say, well, yeah, try living in Blackpool or Burnley or somewhere in the constituency of Makerfield, because this is life for people in streets across the country, in much poorer places where people don't have ready access to a PR campaign or receptive newspapers, right? You know, there are countless, dozens, hundreds, thousands of streets in the country with HMOs in them where people live a version of Piddington's nightmare every day, and Andy Burnham thinks that's unfair. So that's the first thing to say. Yes, though, it's true that any Prime Minister could do without places like Piddington, places like Linton-on-Ouse in North Yorkshire. You definitely don't want. It's a bad sign for the Labour Party always when Nick Timothy, the Shadow Justice Secretary, gets the bit between his teeth and starts campaigning on something, as he does in this morning's Times, making much the same point as the people of Piddington and the people of Linton-on-Ouse in North Yorkshire, which has a Labour MP, by the way, about his own constituency in Suffolk. So, it's difficult for Andy Burnham. I think his response is revealing of how he sees the world, but also the issue. We're just back. Eventually, you reach the same place again, because yes, Andy Burnham thinks it's fair for people to share the load, but what sources in Number 10 are very, very keen to stress to me is that, he thinks numbers should come down. You know, he's not starting from the premise that this is an intractable problem. We just need to redistribute the numbers, redistribute the pay, and its numbers need to come down. To that end, Shabana Mahmood is looking at moving people to disused industrial sites that are far away from anything at all, from a rich area or a poor area, as I reveal in this morning's column. But the thing to remember is that fundamental truth, right? Andy Burnham had two conversations in Ilkeston in Derbyshire on Tuesday. One was with GB News, in which he was asked about Piddington, but the other was on the street, and there was a man shouting, and he had a very polite and expansive conversation with one of Andy Burnham's advisors. But what was the guy saying? He wasn't talking about HMO Britain as Andy Burnham did. He wasn't talking about asylum hotels. He just said, what are you going to do about the boats? And that is still the only game in town on this issue. And it is the thing that will make all of this in time melt away, or at least become less acute, and there won't need to be eventually, if he fixes this, you won't need to requisition the old RAF base next to a chocolate box village in Oxfordshire or whatever. And that's the real test, and Andy Burnham, as on early release, has staked all of his personal credibility on finding it in short order.
Absolutely, and it should have been the test that Keir Starmer tried to pass, and Rishi Sunak himself tried to pass it, and it is a huge issue which weighs heavily on the public consciousness and can undo any government, however effective it might be in other areas. Patrick Maguire, as always, the chief political commentator, thank you for coming on the show and take us through the big stories that are dominating the news today.